order convening the Penn One Board of Supervisors budget meeting, June 10th, 2021. And we are recording as a reminder. I will start by taking roll call. Claudio Campuzano.
Present.
Annalisa Kohler.
Present.
PJ Christopher.
Present.
Jeff Noodleman.
Present.
James Allison. We are all in attendance. And let's maybe just pull up my agenda here quickly. Do we have, item B, do we have any public testimony?
None that I know of.
Okay, moving on to item C. Nick, contract approvals.
We have none for today, sir.
Forgot that's a standing agenda item. Thank you.
That's okay.
Item D, budget discussion. Casey.
Oh boy, oh boy. Hello, everybody. This is an update of what we talked about, 3 weeks ago or so, or 4, I don't remember. And what I'm going to do is just highlight the changes from that discussion, the changes in the budget that have taken place. So I'm going to be reading from the summary that I sent you, the Word document. The total budget is just under $1 million, $994,615. There's an error there in what I sent you. Revenue $853,000, expenditures $859,000, a deficit of $6,000, not $61,000. Those are the only 2 errors there. And I'll walk through the rest of this stuff and alert you that there's a new item that I want to bring up after I get done with the stuff I've already prepared. Beginning balance is up almost $28,000 from last time, from a reconciliation with prior year audit to make sure that the beginning balance is consistent with what the audit says and what Janet says she's got, which is a great thing, getting another $41,000 to this cash-strapped organization. Revenue is down from what we sent you, primarily because we're not spending as much on the pump station rehab project as we had thought earlier. That's going to go into next year. That stuff, of course, is being paid by BES. Expenditures are down $12,622. That's the reduction in estimated spending for pump station rehab. The revenue side is BES reimbursement. And some increases for the District Boundaries project, which is paying for itself this coming year with new people returning to the district, and $2,500 extra for audit and accounting. Ending balance is up $27,862, which includes having to set aside $17,046 for our reserve for the IFA loan repayment to the city, which we haven't been budgeting and which we haven't been paying. But the auditor said we haven't been released from that, so we need to budget that reserve. Revenue of $853 is up $16,000 from last time. Assessment revenue is up about $6,000 from a fine tuning of my calculation of the assessments. And revenue from BES is going up just under $10,000 for the drainage master plan, increase from $170,000 to $180,000. Then what's next? Expenditures are up $11,000, mostly for that $10,000 for the drainage master plan, and carrying over a little over $1,000 for Columbia Slough planning for work that couldn't get done this year. So ending balance, a robust for Penn One, $135,000, up $33,000 from last time. The detail is there. We've talked about where it's coming from. And I mentioned the restricted reserves up $17,000 with restoration of the IFA loan repayment reserve. So total unrestricted reserves of $112,226. Look to be well above the bank requirement of $60,000 that we need at the end of each year. We know about PMLS, but we don't know how much it's going to cost, who's going to be paying what. And that's the discussion that's going to need to be taking place in the next year. Any questions, issues, concerns about any of that before I jump into the surprise? Hearing none, I will move on.
Casey, I do have one. I'm
Yeah.
a basic budget guy, but 32,000, so this is good news until you
Yes.
give us something new, right? Like we
Yes.
have more money than we thought we were going to have.
Yes, this is very good news.
Okay, thank
Gives
you.
us a little more cushion.
Okay,
Make sure we got the cash and meet cash flow and all that good stuff.
thank you.
Uh-huh. The new item is, just had a conversation with Bill this morning, who advises that the project manager for the pump station rehab project thinks that in order to stay on schedule and not have to delay the project for another year, and with cost increases that are happening these days, we will probably want to have another $75,000 in the pump station rehab project. So increase the budget from 100 to 175. There will be no net impact on resources and revenues or the ending balance, because this is, of course, one of the pump station related capital projects that BES reimburses us for. So we'll increase the revenue from BES accordingly. But it just came up, wanted to advise you about it at the first opportunity, which is right now, to see whether you're comfortable with it. And I know Bill has some details he can give you, and Jim may want to say a little bit about it himself. So I'll turn it over to them. Jim first, if he wants to go.
I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of it, and I was hoping to get a little direction from you. We didn't want to surprise you at the format meeting on approval with this, and we do believe there are some options, and we think BES is an amazing partner. So, Bill, do you want to get into what you think the next best steps are in terms of communicating with BES about this?
I can. A little more detail about that $75,000 increase. It is the full amount, 175, that staff feels is needed to complete design and bid the project through for consultant fees as well as MC's labor. The tricky part here is that our current BES task order gives us $150,000, so $25,000 less than the 175. In addition, that task order ends at the end of December of this year, so we're supposed to finish the 150 before that point. We'll be able to do that, but we won't be able to finish the design and bid the project in that timeline. So approving the $175,000 for the full fiscal year would require us to make some assumptions, require you to make some assumptions that that we would be able to find the extra $25,000, either through Penn One's assessments, reserves, or most likely, I'm hopeful that BES will be able to provide us a new task order to continue the project. The current task order scope that they approved for the $150,000 does recognize the project is at least $300,000. So, and they had not approved the full 300,000, just half of that so far. So while I have not talked to James or some of his colleagues there, I'm optimistic that they recognize that another ask will be coming for the second half of this project. When we do ask this fall, we hope to have a better handle on the construction costs as well. So just to confirm that that 300,000 is the total we need, or it's something different. So in my mind, you at least have two options. One, you can approve the 175 and assume that we can find the money between now and January 1st to cover that extra 25,000, or we restrict or you approve a budget up to the amount that BES has already authorized that we can spend. And then sometime during the next fiscal year, we come back to you and ask that you amend your approved budget for the remainder of the amount. So that's the rest of the story. So I'm hopeful that you have some questions and can discuss about what those two options might feel like.
Bill, may I pose a quick question? Is there any possibility we could get in touch with BES between now and the format meeting and see if we can amend that task order before the format meeting, or is that far too ambitious and optimistic?
I'd go with B.
I would go B too, unless James tells me differently.
That makes sense to me. I just thought I would put it out there.
Yeah, no, it's a reasonable question. Thank you.
So how much money is already approved by BES? What's the amount right now?
150,000. Of that, we will likely spend $3,000 of that. So you'll have 147,000 left for next year.
But we need to pick up 25,000 to pay for half of this project.
You will need an extra 25,000 to finish the design and get through the bid process for construction. You
And
will
then
need an
it's gonna-
additional amount later on for the construction phase.
So planning and bidding is gonna cost $175,000.
Yeah, design and bidding would do that.
Or sorry, design and bidding. And just since I'm new, could you show me where this, just on a Google map or something, where exactly this pump station is?
Oh. Yes,
Not that it
Yeah.
really matters, but
I can. Give me a moment and I'll pull that up.
Kind of right between PIR and Heron Lakes Golf Course on the slough.
okay. That's fine. That's good enough. I'm familiar with those areas.
Okay, well, I got the Google map, so let me know if you want to circle back to that.
And then I believe at the last meeting, we were talking about a pump station that kind of needs just keep it running until we actually really fix it. Did I understand that one? And is this the same pumps? Is this the same pump station or is that a different pump station?
So it is the same pump station. The pump station was rebuilt after a fire in the early 50s. And it's, I think I described it to Jim, it has some Jurassic-like features inside that probably need some upgrades. But the building itself is in really poor shape. And it's actually on piers above the water. And so, which is not what you would normally want to do these days when designing pump stations. So yes, it is the one that needs some rehab in order to milk it through until we can replace it. And I'm hopeful that the new urban district will be able to replace it, start the design to replace it within its first 5 years of existence.
So the design that we're being asked to pay for right now is just to milk it. Design to milk it to get it fixed for a later date, correct?
Yeah, we
Okay.
basically, and what will happen is we'll actually put what looks like we're going to end up putting in some more piers around the existing structure and put some trusses underneath for a sort of a superstructure underneath it in order to make sure the building doesn't fall down, which
Okay.
we don't want to happen.
Okay.
I'd just like to take a minute to go through a quick summary of the background of where this whole relationship between Penn One and BES, where it started. We negotiated an IGA with BES back in 2014, in which they agreed to pay the city's share for city rights of way, which hadn't been paying assessments before that, and for influent water, but there isn't any in the district. It also provides that either agency, the IGA is between BES and the 3 districts that are at least partly within the city of Portland, Penn 1, Penn 2, and MCDD. And it provides that we can negotiate task orders for one side or the other to do work for the other. In the meantime, BES has agreed that they will pay some operating costs basically to run pump station operations, and will pay for our capital improvement projects for the next few years. We're hoping up through the time of consolidation, when the new district will have a broader revenue source, and we hope to get GO bonds approved to pay for large projects like replacing this pump station or replacing the pump station in Sandy and other things. So we have to go through this task order process every year. Because the first year we were doing it, we weren't able to get as much of the work done as we had hoped during the fiscal year. The task orders got amended to extend them to a later period. And where that's gone now is that those task orders run through December of the following fiscal year. So it covers parts of fiscal years. So it gets very hard to track. But anyway, we have to go through this process, negotiating task orders. Sure if this one has to go through city council or not, but there is a convoluted process. We will be negotiating a task order with BES to do the work that's in next year's budget. And that will need to be done, as early as it can in the coming fiscal year.
Other questions and thoughts from the board?
Things more.
Other questions and thoughts from the board? I have a couple, but I'd love to hear from other people first.
I have another question. So the work that we're getting prepared to do or being asked to perform on this, does that set us up anything better for actually making the correct fix of this pump station 5 years down the road or whatever that time period is? Or is it truly just that thing falls over, we're not in a good place and we just have to keep this thing running? We're not, is there any sort of infrastructure improvement to it that's going to help us in the future?
Not that I can see right now.
Okay.
It's possible that we can build around this structure. We'd have to fill in a fair amount of the pond in order to reuse part of this structure. PJ, let me go ahead and share the screen. So you all know what we're referring to. Are you all able to see the Google Maps?
Yep. Yes.
So this, of course, is Penn 1. The businesses are primarily along Marine Drive up here. Here's the Expo Center, of course. Here's the ports, Vanport Wetland, the golf course, as well as the raceway. The pump station, all water more or less drains from the north to the south and eventually gets down to the pump station, which is located right here. And the pump station looks like that. So it's possible, I suppose, with enough money to fill in part of the pond here to get out to the pump station. And then we could reuse what we're talking about. Well, what we're anticipating is that we would likely put in some piers around the pump station and again put the trusses underneath to keep it upright. But my instinct says that we'll end up putting a pump station closer to the bank and filling in less of the pond here. So
Fair enough. Thank you.
sure.
So I'll put my 2 cents out, and I'll caveat by saying this is me wanting to have my cake and eat it too. My general thought is from a historical perspective, we've deferred maintenance on these capital items out of necessity. We haven't had the money. More recently, we've secured funding for CIP and operations. And it's my preference to find a way to proceed with our schedule for design and construction, because this is deferred maintenance. It has safety implications. And I believe that we're going to have more competition for materials, more challenges with supply chain, more competition for consultants and construction contractors. I would love to get this moving. So in terms of the order of operations, we can not approve this and then approve it when we get the money, or hoping we'll get the money. It sounds like we will have an opportunity to increase, to get the needed funding through an IGA amendment next fiscal year. But I don't know, in either case, whether we approve the budget and we find that $25,000 in our reserves or something, we as a board provide a backstop for the funding we need to, the funding and the project going forward that we need to authorize. I think we need this project to go forward. So it sounds to me like we will have an opportunity to request funding. There's no guarantee on that. So I would love some perspective on moving the project forward from Bill and maybe from Casey and Nick on where's our backstop. Is our reserves? And then lastly, I'd like to hear from the board in terms of your comfort level in trying to get this moving forward so that we have certainty and can execute the work.
Well, I'll jump in first. I would advise strongly against trying to pay for this out of your meager reserves, because the funding for Penn One, you can't raise enough money through assessments to pay all the obligations that you've got just to keep the place running, just by the constraints that are there. The city has been an incredible partner on this, particularly BES, which jumped in first and made the pledge to support the things we needed to do. And we have been getting money from the general fund a couple of times. And there's another $168,000 in general fund special appropriation that we are, that is in the mayor's, well, it's in the approved budget now. And we assume that it's not going to get taken out at the last minute.
It was adopted yesterday.
Oh, thank you, Claudio. Good. So it's there. So the money's there. That's great. So speaking from a budget manager's perspective, a budget officer's perspective, I think that if we don't get the money, which I expect we will get, BES has been terrific about accommodating our needs on these capital projects. But if we didn't get it, I think our choice is probably that we would have to delay the project rather than dig into our reserves and pay for it with Penn One's money. And then get the money in the future, because BES already knows that our estimate for the project is around $300,000 in total. It's just spread out over like 3 fiscal years. And they have that in their financial plan.
So Casey, is it true then? And so the money you're talking about is the additional 25,000, right? That's the money you're saying don't try to hope that we can come up with.
Correct. We have in the task order that's in effect through December, $150,000.
Sorry, through December of 2021, right?
Yes, through December of this year.
Okay.
There's they've set aside $150,000 that they will reimburse us. So that money's there. Now, we don't have that in the budget. I'll get into that in a minute. But what we need is the additional $25,000 to get us through the rest of this fiscal year. And we want to budget for that and make sure that BES has it in their budget. So really, yeah, it's $25,000 more.
And sorry, when you say,
budget, I'm sorry if I'm
Casey.
confusing.
No, it's just a terminology I need to get correct. When you say fiscal year, when is that to? Is that to June of 2022?
July through June, every public agency in the state has a July to
Right.
June fiscal year because the state law requires it.
So essentially, if we say go, we need to make $25,000 before July of 2022 to pay for the design of this.
Well, we'd need it in hand starting in January, or have it available starting in January to be able to continue the work that's going to go on through December that's already paid for.
And the options for doing that, if I understood you correctly, Bill, are through increased assessment fees, are this kind of, it's not a slush fund, but this additional money that we found, right? This $32,000 or some other way, right?
Correct. The third was a new task order with BES.
And why is there even risk in that? Is there, because BES might say, no, we're not going to give you an additional $25,000.
Correct.
Okay. And then furthermore, if we go down the road and say, yeah, we're going to try to make this money in one of those three ways, we start designing this pump station, right? Or the fix to this pump station, we don't get the $25,000. We're really at ground zero because we've designed a pump station that's not going to be able to be fixed. This is just my thought process. That's not going to be able to be used once everybody consolidates to build it the right way. And then we're just kind of there with a design that doesn't work. Is that correct?
I would characterize it slightly different, but you're on the right path. We'll be able to finish approximately 60% design. So that means that we will have gone through a good chunk of the design process. We're expediting part of this. That's the nuances. But anyway, 60% design. So we'll have a better handle on the construction costs, the permitting that's needed, as well as the remaining work for design. So it won't be lost money unless, you know, that Penn 1 doesn't finish the design and construction before the new district begins. So there's a good stopping place. Not ideal, but it's a good stopping place. So we can basically put on the hold button after 60% design, and then pick it back up when we have the money to continue forward. Now, and as many of you know, construction over water is limited to the in-water work period, which is in this area generally between June 15 and September 15 in the slough. It's a different period in the Columbia River. But so if we can't continuously work on design this year, we will definitely miss the summer of 2022 in water work window, which means it would be delayed a year, which is what Casey was alluding to earlier.
And then we could pick it up if we don't get the 25,000 and not outside of the work window, fully design it and then hit that following design, that work window.
Theoretically correct.
Okay.
For budgetarily, there's really no liability is not the right word, as close as I can come up with, to increasing the budget and also increasing the revenue we expect to get from BES. If there were $175,000 in the budget, both on the expenditure and the revenue side, and the revenue were not forthcoming, we would have to stop work once we exhausted the $150,000. So approving the increase is not going to mean that we are committed to spending that full amount. If we don't get the money, we're not going to spend the full amount.
Casey, I appreciate that clarification. I have two additional questions. One, and I'm sorry, because I think this was covered initially, which is, can you explain why we need 25,000 more? Like what kind of, is it the cost of construction? What's the, well, I guess it's not that because we're not constructing yet, but what kind of accounts for that new higher estimate?
Right. So internal staff produced an estimate of what we thought design and construction would be. So that's where the $300,000 came.
Yep.
And honestly, the cost for constructability of this and the permitting efforts, we just underestimated. And so when we got the quote from our on-call contractor to support this project, the number had risen to the amount that we're proposing here.
Yep, nope, that makes sense. And just not understanding the history around fully the relationship with BES, like have we gone to BES in the past and said, hey, it's a little bit more, can we get a little bit more money? Is that something that's happened in the past, and what has that looked like?
Yes, we have, and they have been amenable. We've had to move money around in a couple of instances, amend task orders and the like, which amending the task order just takes drafting it, getting legal approval, and having the executive director, MCD, and the bureau director at BES sign it.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to go through city council.
So,
Okay.
and to be clear, if we're able to, it would be nice to, when we come back to them this summer or fall for a new task order, it won't be just for that 25K, it'd be for the rest of the project.
Right.
And-
So,
yeah.
along with other project expenses as well as operating expenses that Casey alluded to earlier.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I think in light of all of that information and Casey's continued clarification, I do not know why we would not put this money in our budget. That makes sense to me.
Thank you. Looks like Jeff's got his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. You just summed it up. I was just going to appreciate all the dialogue, but I think remembering our role as fiduciaries and understanding that from a budgetary standpoint, yeah, although we have done it in the past, Jim, I think you were on the board back then, we have approved over my vote, but we have approved a budget that was not balanced, which I found unconscionable, but we did. But, being good stewards, we have to look at it from a financial standpoint, but at the same time too, with the overlay of what the heck it is that we're doing out here. And, none of us have a crystal ball. That pump station is beyond repair. It's not beyond repair, but I mean, it could fall down while we're on this call. So again, with those two factors, I think this is something we just have to do. First of all, it's only $25,000. And as Casey well put, putting it in one side of the ledger and then putting a corresponding entry on the other side of the ledger does not in and of itself mandate the expenditure. And, also during the course of the fiscal year, things come up, we can spend less, we can spend more, we can modify budgets. I mean, budgets are guidelines. They are not set in stone, so I'm very confident that our team and the staff, which is phenomenal, will find a way, because we can't have a bake sale to help our revenue. And so the longer we keep putting this off, the longer it's going to be. So I would say, let's go for it and go forward.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Claudio?
Yeah, no, I, as a general matter, agree 100% with Jeff. A couple of things. One, I would note just for the board that, while it's only $25,000, that is about 10% of what we raise through assessments each year. So an unsubsidized budget looks a lot less like $1 million and a lot more like $250,000. So just want to make sure that we got perspective from both sides. Second is actually, the conversation about this pump station has been going on since before I got here, and I actually really appreciate PJ pushing in on a lot of, asking a lot of questions so just as a general matter, maybe like 25 words or less, probably a little bit more than 25 words, but just likelihood and consequence of failure of the pump station. What does that mean for the district? would be useful for, I know we've got a number of new folks. I've been here 2 years now, so I can't really call myself new, but it'd be useful to just kind of hear what the likelihood of failure, consequence of failure would look like.
Thank you, Claudio. I definitely agree with that. I'd like to hear that.
So let me give you some analogies here for that. It would depend on the time of year. Right now, we probably could let the pump station just turn off the pump station, cross our fingers, and there's no significant rains or any rains really that come through. This pump station is at the bottom of the watershed. There's no other outlets from Penn 1. So that's the fundamental piece. So it's pretty important in that manner. If it goes down and we have to mobilize some pumps to pump out that pond or pump down that pond, we at one point, maybe 3 years ago now, we looked at doing something similar at the Sandy pump station out in SDIC. It was $20,000 a month to do that. So you could do that, or you can let PIR and Heron Lakes flood. It wouldn't be like Vanport's. So, but there would be enough ponding, enough flooding that both areas, certainly PR would be unusable, and portions of the golf course would be unusable.
Great.
Bill, quickly, is it just so we understand risk fully, in addition to undesirable localized flooding, do we risk saturation at the toe of the southern levee of the district?
Short answer is no. You would need a significant amount of rain to rain within Penn 1 to get up to the toes of the levee. That's not likely, and if it is, we have a lot more problems than this. So what you're referring to, James, is more of a concern for us when there's high water on the external side of the levee and it seeps through to those toes.
So just to push into this a little bit more, and at the risk of covering stuff that's been covered well in the past, and B, it's a parks property that is impacted by any flooding, so I should watch where I go. You mentioned what sort of bringing in pumps would cost. We're talking about an upwards of $300,000 sort of interim project before we get to a full project. And we're talking about potentially a monthly cost of $30,000 for a short term in the event of internal flooding, like internal drainage issue. So just wondering what the thinking has been, that seems like an alternative that we could go to in the case of flooding, but I'm a finance guy, not an engineer, so it'd be interesting to hear what the thinking has been.
I'm sorry, Claudio, the thinking of whether we pump or whether folks flood?
Yeah, well, whether sort of bringing in pumps from outside and not relying, in the event that we get a flooding event and the pump station fails, that's the risk that we're trying to mitigate, right? And we're mitigating with a $300,000+ project, where the solve for that in the short term would be bringing in pumps from outside to manage that sort of acute flooding issue, right? At something like $30,000 a month, but I don't know how long that would take. I'm just sort of walking through alternatives in my head.
It may be $30,000 a month. I said 20, but it could be a little higher depending on escalation and so forth. So yes, you put in those pumps. They're supposed to be temporary, right? But if you're not fixing the pump station at the same time you're doing a temporary pump, those temporary pumps become more like permanent pumps, and you're spending a lot more money to keep those going. Of course, they they would need continuous TLC because you have to go out there and put diesel in there and so on and so forth. So putting those in could be a Band-Aid, but this board would have to have a conversation about what to do to fix the pump station that failed. And second off, if you feel like after consulting with the city, maybe they're willing to have those properties flood for the interim. But that's a different.
I just consulted with them. We don't like it.
Okay.
So
And do we know, I guess I should maybe know this, but maybe we don't know this, when the consolidation will occur and the real pump will be put in and fixed and solve the problem? Or is that a loaded question?
I'll take a stab and let others fill in the gaps for me. We are anticipating that the new urban district will start somewhere around 2025. That's the preliminary timeline, or fiscal year 25, 26. So others will have to jump in there. There's no guarantee, even once that happens, that we have funding right away. And so we are envisioning that there would be a bond measure floated that the voters would have to approve. And within that bond measure, I'm hoping to include a new pump station here as part of that effort.
And then with this approval of this funding, and then we get the additional 150,000 for the total 300,000. When's the soonest this existing pump station is backed up and pumping correctly again? Right, so if ideally it's 2025 to get consolidated, call it 2026 that we're putting in the new pump. Is this pump that we're trying to fix right now operational in 2022, 2023, and how many years between?
So let me help clarify this a little bit. What we're talking about is just the building, not the pumps inside the building. So there are two separate items there. So we want to make sure the building stays upright, and this project makes sure that the building stays upright for 5, 10 plus years. So we have time to conduct the design for a new pump station that could be then constructed, in 2028, 2030, something like that.
Okay, so we're looking, that helps me.
Yeah, the pump station, to be clear, the pump station operates correctly now. And I want it to continue to operate correctly. I just want to make sure that there's a building there, so there's they can do that.
I have just one last comment and one question. My comment is akin to the discussion we're having, which is there's some uncertainty as to the funding that the new district will receive, how they will apply that funding. So we could have this pump station for 10 or more years. And so the temporary pumps are a throwaway. There's no value other than reducing an immediate risk or immediate threat. We're investing in an asset. And although I think ultimately this isn't the asset we want, it may be the asset that we invest in and keeps us going for 10 years, 15 years. We just don't know. So I advocate for moving forward. My assumption though, and Bill, tell me if I'm incorrect, this is in terms of staffing, this is part of your work plan. You're engaged in this work and you're ready for this work. And so stopping is not ideal or desirable.
Well, it's not ideal and desirable just to provide the services that this district, I think, should provide to continue to have this pump station operational. But yes, we have the staffing to keep this project moving. If for whatever reason the project stops, we'll just have to refocus on some other projects.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, do we need a motion, or is it that we're going to do we need at least a motion to talk about what we want to see in the budget that we're going to approve?
No, not at this point. You vote on it on the 29th, so however long that is from now. And we've never needed to have a motion to say, yeah, what you've got so far is okay with us. If you informally say, yes, go ahead, add the amount to the budget, both on the resources and the requirements side, then I will do that and bring it to you. We'll bring it to you for approval on the 29th of June. But you don't need to vote on it. And what I've heard so far is that I haven't heard anybody say that they don't think we ought to do this.
Thank you, Casey. I just want to make sure no one objects to that, pursuing that course.
I'm absolutely fine with pursuing that course.
As am I.
Great.
Thumbs up from Annalise.
Thank you to the board for this
Thank
discussion. Thank you to the staff for facilitating.
Thank you all.
I plan to flush twice now between now and when we get the agreement with BES to help out. So that's what I'm gonna do.
So now, I assume we need to continue with the budget discussion. Are we done with budget discussion and moving on to CIP?
I'm done with everything I was going to present. If you've got anything else, then now's the time.
Anything else on budget?
I got a quick question. So with the 30,000 and change that's remaining, what happens with that? Do we put it in a special fund for a rainy day, or do we just pile it back into the budget and use it?
It's in the ending balance. You're not planning to spend it.
Okay,
Your reserves are quite low. They're quite thin. So we're trying to build up those reserves to a more manageable level. We also have cash flow issues getting from, hello, Hand, from the start of the fiscal year in July until assessments come in November. So
okay.
we need to have money in the bank to be able to pay ongoing expenses in those 5 months.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on the agenda, we're only about 10 minutes behind, which is great given the discussion we just had. I just am compelled though, Casey, thank you for having those images behind you, the City of Portland building, which I have not been in for a year and a half. It's great to see. So let's move on to agenda item E, the CIP update with Bill.
Yeah, thanks. So this is a continuation, some degree of the budget conversation, but in addition to passing the budget each year, we asked that the board approve a 5-year CIP package as well. And in your meeting package, just after the Casey's budget documents, is the capital improvement plan for a proposed plan for next year. And since there are 1 or 2 folks who are new to this, there's a short 4-page description of the capital improvement plan, an overview and introduction. There, page 2 talks about the steps that staff take in order to identify projects and prioritize projects within the CIP. We have a series of criteria and then some added value criteria we use to sort of nudge projects among the up and down among the list. It's worthwhile to note that if a project has a regulatory compliance component that gets moved up to the top of the pile, and I think, oh right, or contains partner financial support for a limited time. The BES projects are a great example. This project we just talked about, as well as the fall protection projects that are funded by BES. So those get moved up to the top of the list right away. Page 3 and 4 talks more about the specifics of this 5-year outlook, and to some degree comparing it to the previous version that had been passed the previous year in June of 2020. You can see or read what is anticipated next year. There are a couple of adjustments with, and these will have to be updated based upon our conversation this morning with the the structural rehab project at PIR pump station. And I'll circle back to the PMLS projects because I guess there'll be a couple questions there. We do apply an escalation factor of 4% each year. Though years, the first 3 years, we've bumped it up a little bit higher to 4.5% based on some of our research of market trends and construction costs and so forth. So after that, it comes back down to 4% escalation for the following years. So, and then there are the two appendices. The first appendix is a table that you've seen from your last, very similar from your last meeting. The amount changed a little bit based on what Casey mentioned about the drainage master plan. And we'll change it yet again to show 175,000 for FY 2022 for the PIR pump station structural upgrade. And the last set of appendices, which will need a cover page, are individual project summary sheets. So these are one-page sheets with the intent to give you a glimpse of what the problem is, what the solution is, where it's located, and other budget details. So there's a handful of them in this project. Similar to last time, the 5-year CIP and the 10-year outlook for that matter, because there's a second 5 years in that table, is dominated by the PMLS projects. There's 2 phases that we've identified here. One is the PED or design phase. I keep forgetting PED refers to. I think it's called pre-construction and engineering and design. PED, that's right. So it's a core term that I hadn't run across until just recently. But to me, it's the design phase, and then there's construction phase afterwards. The totals here represent one version of an allocation of the costs among the 4 districts. The Corps of Engineers identified a total cost for the entire set of projects. It was over 115 million, and that's for both design and construction. Of that, there's a local match of approximately 35% that the local non-federal sponsor districts have to support, financially support as part of the project. So there's a lump number from that 35%. And then from that, we staff have tried to distribute that among 4 districts. And the version you see in front of you is one version of that distribution. It's a lot of money. And you also know that you have not had a conversation about what that distribution looks like. And so if all goes well, and Congress approves funding this project, at least the federal side, it could happen. It could start as early as FY 2023, and then having construction starting in FY 2026. So circling back to PJ's comments earlier, that corresponds to the new district starting probably in FY 2026. And so there's some question about, whether, the question of what the construction phase, at least, presumably would be paid for by the new urban district, but design would come prior to that if the timeline continues as shown here. So that's the background for those 2 line items. There's a lot of ifs in those 2 lines, but I would welcome some feedback about how, whether you think this is appropriate.
So Bill, as I understand it, the 14 million I'm looking at here is 30% of 115 million total that the Corps of Engineers thinks it's going to cost for all 4 districts to do all the work that they need to do. And then it's quartered out between all 4 of those districts. So SDIC's number might be 20 million and NCDD's might be a different million, right? And that stab at it was you and your staff saying, this amount should go to Pen 1, this amount should go to Pen 2, this amount should go to MCDD, correct?
That's correct. I'll correct just a slight adjustment in the very beginning of that description. I said it's about $115 million from that. Your district and the other 3 districts, or the local sponsor, whoever that is, needs to pay 35% of that.
30, okay.
And so from that lump sum, then we distribute it to the 4 districts.
Okay,
So 14 million is your portion of that split.
right, okay. And I guess, do we know, and sorry, I didn't dig that deep into the notes and anything. Do we know what those PMLS projects are? Or are they just kind of a guess right now? Or are we pretty solid on what they are?
Myself. Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yes, we know what they are. And I've given you a glimpse of that on page 24 of your extremely long meeting minutes or meeting summary, meeting materials. So PDF page 24 of 162 in my version.
It's in there, Bill. If it's in there, Bill, we don't need to go over it here.
Yeah, anyway, so there's the 1 pager in there that shows
Okay.
where your work is.
Perfect, thank you.
Sure.
I just want to take the opportunity to stress the fact that it's a placeholder, right? We had our SDIC board meeting earlier this week and a lot of questions around that allocation scheme and wanting to have a lot more conversation about it. So all that's going to continue to be discussed, and you're not obligating yourself at this point. We're trying to be as transparent as we can be, as often as we can be, to make sure people understand this is the scale of work that we need to accomplish to ensure everyone's safety.
So, and to highlight the placeholder concept, if you look back at that table for the 5-year CIP, there's another placeholder in there for a project that's associated with the LRC FEMA accreditation. These are the levy accreditation projects. And I had just put in literally some placeholder numbers, $5,000, $10,000 type of numbers each year. That's not what's it's going to cost, but it's a recognition that that project is going to be coming. In that case, we decided to plug in numbers that are a lot smaller. So different type of placeholder, but the same type of concept. So, yeah.
Any other questions or discussion? Great, thank you, Bill.
I'm just going to say it's going to be really fun to figure all that out. It's going to be great. You guys are going to really like it.
So James, if you don't mind, if there are no other questions about the CIP, I'll make the changes associated with our discussion earlier in the meeting about the PIR pump station. So the 100,000 will be replaced with 175. And then I'll resubmit this package for your consideration and approval at the format meeting at the end of June. So the rest of the CIP updates starts on page 26 of 162. And that's the updates for the existing projects, the capital projects that are occurring this fiscal year. I don't need, if you are having trouble with time or anything, unless there's some questions, you can read those on your own. But I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you prefer, I can walk through them. So hearing nothing, maybe you're welcome to contact me if you have questions about, again, projects that are happening this fiscal year. That includes some fall protection work over at PIR, the pump station upgrade that's happening. We're going to be talking about the drainage master plan here next. And just a reminder that we rebuilt the pumps and motor at PIR pump station earlier in the fiscal year. So that project's been done for a little while now. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. And thank you for the detailed write-ups on the capital projects,
Yeah, those
including
are awesome.
the picture of the SCADA system. That was neat to see. So we're going to move on to assets and liabilities. Is that right?
I'm afraid you have me for some more time. Sorry about that. So for this agenda item, I'm joined with Jamie Damon and Kearns and West. Jamie has been one of our facilitators for this project with the board working group that Claudio has been participating in and has given up some of his time to help us prepare this material and other conversations. So appreciate his time on that. Let me, I have a short presentation to make. This, what's in your meeting packet is the bulk of the pages. It's about 120 pages long. It's the draft of the project's final report. Yeah, we've been working towards this end for some time, and the intent is for y'all to have a chance to look through it as much as you feel is appropriate. And I am hoping that by the end of this month, or if you're not comfortable with it later, but the end of this month, to approve the final version of this report, because it's one of the steps that are needed as part of the dissolution process for Penn 1 as we transfer to the new urban district. So let me, unless there are questions, let me jump into the PowerPoint presentation. I'm hoping it's going to be about 10 minutes-ish, and then spend the rest of the time for Q&A as needed. Okay, are you able to see the slide? Okay, head nods. So it's the assets and liabilities project. The purpose of this project, again, for those who've been around for a little bit, this is a repeat, but as part of the legislation that created the new urban district, the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District, RS 550-360-1B states that the new district is to assume the duties, assets, and liabilities of dissolved districts or corporation. And so your responsibility as a district is to list and value those duties, assets, and liabilities. So this project was put together to pull that information together and document it accordingly. To do that, we created a board working group of 5 people. Claudio was part of that, but we also had representation from the other 4 districts. In addition, Eric Molander is a member of the new urban district. I'll note that Corky Collier from MCDD and Mary Helen Kincaid from Penn 2 are also members of the new urban district. So they have joint roles there. We could not have gotten this work done without Jamie's work and others at Kearns and West. FCS Group was our financial consultants as part of this effort, and Brown Caldwell provides some engineering support for the asset management components that I'll talk about soon. So we're at the end of the project. This started officially started back in the fall, and we've had several board meetings, both individually with you as well as in a format session. We talk about the definitions of assets and liabilities, the valuation method, and now we're at a point where you're seeing a draft version of this before the final is created. So what's in that 120 pages? Well, there's a 2-page executive overview. So if nothing else, hopefully you'll have an opportunity to read through that. The rest of the document's pretty lengthy, so I can appreciate it would take a lot of time. But we do have a section about just the general purpose and background of the project, the ORS reference, and so forth. Then Hong had an opportunity to draft a section that outlines the duties of the drainage district. We talked the next following section. We talked about definitions and methodologies used to value these assets, liabilities. Nick had a chance to draft a section that enumerates the assets and liabilities, and values them based upon your audit from 2019, 2020. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And finally, there are other considerations. So beyond the duties, assets, and liabilities that currently exist as of 2021, there's a section here that's forward-looking to inform the new districts about capital needs that staff expect that they will face in the coming 20 years or so of their first existence. So, and there's some references. The duties section talks about the legal commitments, of course, or legal expectations to act. If they're determined by their exercise of discretionary authorities and powers. Hong walked through a series of sections within this chapter that outline what those duties are, and starting with the reclamation plan for the district and formation records. Talks about the plans and reports that are recognized by the chief engineer, as well as contracts with the federal government. Those contracts relate to the local district, your district's acceptance of the federal government's work to improve the levee system. So these would have been contracts this district would have signed back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s or so when the levees were improved. And finally, she notes about board resolutions. What's in this section isn't not an exhaustive list, but it's a list of duties with the information that was available to us, and certainly covers material that's recent, and to the degree we had access, quick access to other records, they're referenced in here. Hong can comment or answer any questions about that if you have some. The definitions section, those have been around for a bit. The definitions for assets and liabilities are the same as what you saw back in January, so that hasn't changed. The valuation method is still the same. In accounting world, something is called original cost less depreciation. Turns out to be the same method that our auditors use and we use to depreciate assets for the independent audit report. So that was fortuitous. And finally, the other methodologies really depend on what engineering documents we pulled to give a sense or to describe what the future capital needs are. So here's a glimpse of the assets and liabilities for your district as well as the other 3 districts. Again, this is pulled out of the auditor's reports from FY 1920. And the information matches what those reports are. This is an important step that the board working group and staff felt was important because in order to have some sense of credibility of these numbers, we want to make sure that it matches those audit reports. So if people have some questions about it, and they say, well, it's appropriate to have some questions, but we're matching what the auditors did. Hopefully that answers a number of them. And if not, that's a deeper question about what's also part of the audit reports. So your net position is currently over 1.5 million, but it's in the black, which is great. And you can see the numbers for the other districts. the liabilities on MCD side are significant in part because that's the district that has staff. There's of course a lot more detail in the report. The final section deals with other considerations. ORS statute also made sure that we recognize intangible assets as well as pump stations and other tangible assets. MCD has a water rights, but also collectively over the 4 districts, there are over 735 easements and deeds that we recorded and have a record of. It's incomplete, and there's probably more out there as well. We've touched already on the Portland Metro Levy System, the PMLS projects. The local match is approximately $50 million. And then again, we've talked about the distribution of that, but that's an example of future capital investments that the new urban district should recognize. There's also the FEMA levy certification projects or accreditation projects. Again, this is the effort to make sure we can reaccredit the levy system to keep the insurance rates down in businesses and properties behind the system. But beyond those 3 things, we did some work to do some forecasting for a 20-year outlook for other capital needs that are outside of the first 3 bullets. And this is where the asset management piece came in. And so we had enumerated this over 1,700 assets that we track, not only of your district, but the other districts, and identified when those assets would need to be replaced or rehabbed, and then came up with some estimates for a 20-year period broken out in 10-year segments. The first bullet is about the major capital improvements. Those represent asset replacements or a project with a series of assets replacements that are over $1 million each. So in the first 10 years, we estimate that it would be about $24 million of capital improvements that are needed throughout the 4 districts. In the second 10 years, about 31 million. So beyond those major, what I'm calling a major project, there are ongoing capital investments that are needed. And those are less than $1 million each. And you can see what the dollar amounts for first and second 10-year periods are. And finally, in this section, all of you probably recognize that the levy system and the drainage system function because of a partnership of property owners in the area. And so there are many, many assets that your district nor the other districts own, or property that you don't own, that contribute to this to the system success. And so during our engineering planning estimate of studies, drainage master plans, and the levy assessments, we've identified several assets that need to be improved. They're owned by others, but need to be updated in order for the system to function properly. In your case, a great example are the outfalls from the properties along Marine Drive, as well as Marine Drive itself and the runoff. All that stormwater goes to the Columbia River through outfall pipes below your flood wall and levee system. And so none of those are owned by Penn One, but they're owned by those property owners. And in order, once they get to the end of their life, they need to be replaced or rehabbed somehow. And so those are types of assets that the new urban district should recognize, and the possibility that they may need to negotiate with those owners about replacing them. This is an example of what the 20-year operating capital requirements look like of the 4 districts. This graph will change. This graph is in the report, but this graph will change after we've made one more round of adjustments. But as many of you have seen from your own work, looking at outlooks of capital improvements, there's sometimes there are waves of investments that are needed, and that's certainly the case here as well. So I can go into detail of that another time as needed. Next steps, I think I've covered most of these already, but the intent here is to get feedback from you today and meet with the board working group next week on the 15th, get their final input, and then polish up the report and have it available for you for your June 29th meeting for consideration and possible approval. So with that, I'll stop sharing. And I wonder if Claudio would be willing to, or has any comments about the process or the reports before we turn over for other comments.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate having been part of the process. Staff has been awesome. Jamie, thank you so much for all your help, and other consultants as well, Gordon, and I know it really helped us through some difficult discussions. And so it's been a really collaborative process, and I think that you guys have done an amazing amount of work in pulling together a lot of information. You know, I know that Nick, you came on board recently, but big lift as well. So thank you. So I think that, you know, I'm really happy with where this is headed. You know, as I was reviewing the full document, I know that it's a very informational document, you know, and I noticed in the next steps, we're talking about finalizing the draft and thinking through recommendations. So I know that that's the recommendations portion where there's not a lot in there about on sort of what the urban should do with this information. I know that it's I think you guys have done an amazing job of sort of nailing what the ORS required, and now it's really going to be up to the urban to figure out sort of how they're going to be using a lot of this information to move into the next phase. So interested, you know, I'm interested in hearing from the team sort of how we're thinking if there are going to be sort of specific recommendations, you know, where we're headed with that, and I guess that's the next phase for our work as the team supporting you guys.
Questions from the board? I have a quick question. When's the next time we'll get an update on this with at the format? Because I think that will be perhaps a robust discussion.
Perhaps it will be a robust discussion. Yes, that is the next phase of it. To degree you are able to provide some feedback to me prior to that, I'd appreciate that. I think I told the other board that if you can get something to me by the end of next week, then I have a better chance of giving you a polished, revised document for consideration at the format meeting. There's a lot of data in there. A lot of it, hopefully it's fairly factual and objective. The 20-year forecast, of course, is a little crystal ballish, just like anything when you're looking out like that. But the intent is to give the new urban district a glimpse of the type of investments that they'll be looking at in the coming future as they look at options for their revenue development.
Yeah. And so I guess two things. Number one, you know, Bill, do you have a sense of specific recommendations that might be built into the executive summary? I don't think I saw any specific recommendations. It really is purely informational at this point, which frankly I'm fine with. It meets the requirements of the ORS. But you know, to the degree that there are recommendations that come out of this, I'd be interested in having that discussion and knowing where staff is headed. The second thing is I really appreciate the way you guys handled the other considerations. I think that's the first time I've seen that section sort of really built out and with a lot of that data. And actually, I really appreciate the way that you guys have done the 20-year forecast. I think that, you know, it really speaks to the work that we would have to do in all of these districts, regardless of all the other projects. And that's the portion that's really broken out district by district, whereas the PMLS and the certification projects are very much, you know, sort of discussed at a high level. And I think that we started getting at the question of the allocation discussion. I think it just, you know, allocations pre-urban, any kind of rate making adjustments post-urban, those are complicated conversations that we need to keep having. You know, I feel like there's a lot of good information to help support those conversations without this document sort of pre-ordaining any direction on those. So I feel like we're in a good place with this.
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback. I tried hard not to make recommendations here, and try to keep it as objective as possible. You did note that I separated out major capital improvements versus ongoing operating capital needs, partly as a nod to the potential of different revenue methods to fund those types of projects. But it may turn out that it's funded by the same revenue tool, but at least they have the option to examine that. Looks like Nick has a comment.
Thank you. Real quick, I did want to mention, and Bill knows this well, we're continuing to massage this. So like the version you'll see in a week or two for the format meeting will be very similar, same format, but we made lots of small improvements. So every time we get feedback from the different boards, we'll say, well, like on my piece, the one-page summary of the assets and liabilities, I've made some tweaks to the categories, the wording, rearranged a few things to make it more understandable. So the next version you see will be very similar, but hopefully a little bit cleaner even.
Other comments, questions? Great. Well, thank you to the staff, and Claudio, thank you so much for stepping into this for the board. Much appreciated. Are we ready to move on to item G in the Penn 1 Drainage Master Plan, Water Quality Plan? Great.
All right. Hey, everyone. I am McKenna. I don't think I've met all of you yet somehow, but it's nice to finally do so. I joined the engineering team last January, and I'm the project manager for this master plan. So my main goal today is seeking approval for the board to authorize a contract with our consultant Parametrics for up to $135,000 to complete the drainage and water quality master plan. Also wanted to just give an update on what we've done so far in the scope, because I know it's been a while since you've heard about it, or some maybe not at all. So first off, you probably noticed a new name. So formerly called just the Drainage Master Plan, we changed it to be the Drainage and Water Quality Master Plan, which was to reflect BES priorities for this project. Last summer, we spent a good amount of time with BES and park staff at the city to make sure all of our priorities aligned and were accounted for in the scope. We went through procurement in November to January of this year, and we did only receive one proposal in our process, but we were all in agreement that Parametrics would be able to produce a successful plan for us. So we awarded them the contract in January, and since then we've been just going through several rounds of scope and fee negotiations. I think Bill mentioned in your last meeting too that we were working to confirm some funding, which was actually related to a budget increase that we were able to secure for this project. Huge thanks to BES staff for working with us on that. We were actually able to transfer some unspent funds from the SCADA and PIR pump rebuilds that happened this year on the same stormwater IGA task order. So we were able to increase the budget by about $45,000, which is great and will allow the consultant to like go in a little bit more depth. We're able to add some stuff back into the scope. And then now we'll have some contingency just in case anything comes up during the project. So as you saw earlier from Casey, the projected budget we have for next year is $180,000, which again is all funded by BES through the Stormwater IGA. So just to highlight some things in the scope quickly, and I think you have some of these notes on I think it's the last page of your long packet. So the focus of this plan is to identify opportunities for improvement to Penn 1's drainage system function, as well as looking at water quality and habitat opportunities. So to do that, we're going to identify deficiencies in those systems through various ways. Stakeholder coordination will be really important here. So including Parks and Metro and Port of Portland, among the other landowners in the district. The consultant will go through an extensive data collection period. We'll do some site visits, pump station flow testing, and we'll be updating a stormwater model to better simulate current conditions for Penn 1's internal drainage for various size storms. Then we're going to evaluate and prioritize potential projects through an alternatives analysis. And ultimately, we'll have a final master plan that will include up to 12 recommended projects with fact sheets and cost estimates. So that'll actually be half and half split. So we'll have 6 projects focusing on Penn 1 drainage and infrastructure improvements, and then 6 focusing on watershed health components, which will be water quality and habitat. And then throughout the scope, we have like several workshops planned with MCD staff, BES staff, and park staff to review deliverables along the way. We made sure that concerns we heard from parks were incorporated early on last year. Mainly what we heard was making sure that they're able to maintain their land use and current operations at PIR and the golf course. So yeah, the benefit of this, it'll help us to better inform the CIP process. We'll be able to identify and prioritize the needs in Penn 1 better, and we'll also have more detailed cost estimates laid out. We'll be able to engage the landowners in the process, which will be great, and hear their concerns or any drainage issues they might have on their properties. And then we'll get that updated stormwater model, which will help us better understand flood risk and how the pump stations will operate during larger storms. And lastly, it's a great opportunity to collaborate with our partners. So also in your packet was the CIP update that Bill mentioned, like the one pager that has some more information on there. It has the schedule. You'll see it's pretty fast-paced schedule the consultant is working with right now. They're planning to finish this in 6 months, which is pretty quick. So tentatively, the completion date could be as early as this December. We're hoping to get started right around July 1st. So yeah, the contract that we're drafting right now with Parametrics, again, would be for up to $135,000, which is within the 180 budget projected for next year. And that is pretty much all I have. Wanted to see if anyone has questions or comments on the scope or anything.
I don't have, I guess I have one question. Well, first I have a comment, and I think it's mostly for, just as a reminder to the board. For starters, thank you, McKenna, for the presentation and for all of the meetings and coordination work to get us to this point of having a secured contract. I know that was a lot of listening, and this is a little bit different from the drainage master plans done by the other 3 districts. So thank you for putting in that effort. it's a reminder to the board that a drainage master plan is not required by the Corps of Engineers, but it is I think considered a best management practice for levee for operations and levee recertification, levee certification. So this is really important. I think the nice thing about this is it goes a step further, partnering with, it will partner with all of the landowners, the major landowners in particular, to improve habitat, water quality, look at the best opportunities for a drainage, a holistic drainage network within the district. It really tees up, I guess, or gives MCDD a nice roadmap for the way that I think the new district will want to manage things for best practices. So this feels like a milestone to me. So it's great. One question though, I think Brown and Caldwell did the previous drainage master plans, and Parametrics, like you said, great firm. Anything you're seeing in terms of lessons learned that we'll need to give Parametrics, this being their first shot at this type of effort, first shot for us, that is?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. The previous plans, Brown and Caldwell was the main consultant, but Parametrics was a sub-consultant on all of them, so they were involved. And for Penn One, it's actually flipped. So Brown and Caldwell is still a sub-consultant. They're going to be doing all of the modeling, which is really good because that is, I think, one of the huge benefits that they've done the past three. So they kind of know what kind of data they're working with already. So I think it should go pretty smoothly since they kind of both already, have had that experience with the other three. Yeah.
The other thing I'll add to McKenna's description is we make sure to set aside some money for sort of a second and smaller round of survey efforts. So there's some survey work early on, but what we learned from the last master plans is that it's helpful to be able to go back out one more time, even just for half a day, to collect some information that may have been missed or wasn't envisioned at the first time around. So that's another example of a lesson learned.
On the schedule, do you know what you might expect from the board or the organizations represented on the board, what you might need from them in terms of comments on workshops, or when we might need to make ourselves available for periodic review of the deliverables?
Yeah, great question. So I think once we get started, one of Parametrics's I guess ways to help make the fast-paced schedule work is they're hoping to send out kind of calendar blocks of time that we'll need to review for that whole period, which I think will be great, and we'll be able to forward those on to people that might want to comment. And then in task 3, which is about, it's going to be probably late July, early August, is when the Parametrics and us will conduct some individual interviews with Parks, Metro, and Port staff. And then internally, I'm also going to be working with our public outreach folks to send out just like a survey letter to the remaining landowners. So that'll also happen in July.
Great. One, I don't want to be like adding scope. Really can't, but I'm reminded that the water tends to flow downhill onto city properties, but we've got a great board here with this city representation and Metro and the Port. We've got at least two large landowners that are in graphic packaging and harsh investments, and obviously stormwater from those areas. I think some of that comes south. A lot of it, I think, as Bill mentioned, goes north, but anything that the board can do to use this as an opportunity to engage those other folks who we represent would be welcome. I'm happy to take on any assistance with that.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think I'm hoping to just kind of mimic similar outreach that we did on the last master plans. From what I hear, it worked fairly well. So sending out letters and then maybe doing follow-up if we don't hear back. And then I think also giving an opportunity to comment once we have a draft plan together at the end.
Super. Well, thanks again. Any other questions or comments from staff or the board? All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I think we'll need a motion for the contract approval if everyone's on board with that.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
I'll
Is
second
the motion to authorize a certain level of funding, or just to enter into the contract?
Yeah, so it would be to authorize executive director to sign a contract with Parametrics for up to $135,000.
Great. So in the memo here, authorize.
Or Hong, you can add to that if my
Okay, yeah.
more.
I was going to say a motion to authorize the executive director to execute on a contract up to that certain amount with a consultant to do the specific work. So
I'll read what's in the memo. Authorized contract with Parametrics for $135,000 to complete the drainage and water quality master plan that has been budgeted in the fiscal year 2021-22 CIP.
Move that.
Can I motion?
So moved.
Okay, I hear a motion. I think we have a second. Let's do
Ask a couple questions. Hi, McKenna. Great job. And I may have misunderstood you or misheard you. I thought you made a reference to the fact that the contract had already been entered into and they were doing the work. So is that not correct?
No, we're drafting the contract right now. It's not,
Okay, so no
it's
contract.
not signed yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
so thank you. All right, so we haven't seen the contract, or Han has seen. So
no,
I
Kelly
don't
has
know
seen
how a
it.
board can approve a contract that doesn't exist or that none of us have seen. And it's not I don't get paid to read the contracts, although if someone put it in front of me, I would. So I'd have to say, subject to review and approval by,
council.
council, then sure. But I think it's very either premature or a little out of line to ask for board approval of a contract that flat out doesn't exist and we've never seen.
I would add to that, sir. No, I apologize for the confusion. We're changing the agenda format where we try to put all the contracts in one spot going forward. But we still have individual project managers, advocate for their contracts as they should. So going forward, I would summarize these contracts under the contract part of the agenda. But the normal practice would be to ask the board for basically a conceptual permission to develop and then enter into this contract.
Right.
And we would always put it in our standard language, subject to review by legal. So Hong or Kelly would review it, but that would be the normal practice, that when we get above a certain level, we would ask your permission to develop a contract, and then with legal's review, the executive director would see it. So you wouldn't normally, unless you tell us to, we wouldn't normally bring the completed contract back to you, but you would approve that we would develop it.
Agreed. But as we sit here right now, that's not the process. Am I wrong?
So let me
So
suggest
Hong,
that.
you haven't read and approved the contract yet, correct?
Well, the contract will be on a form, a template form that we have read and approved. Really, the primary purpose today, and I apologize that the language didn't make it through, but the primary purpose today is for the board to approve conceptually up to, I believe, $135,000 to retain a consultant. I don't think you need to specify it's Parametrics, because who knows what might happen, to conduct the drainage master plan study.
And I
So
think the key action is to authorize me to sign that contract.
I think that right there goes back to Nick's explanation that we've started a new contract approval process, that once that's ready to go, we can come back and do it as a consent agenda. Is the contract ready to go, McKenna?
Yeah, so, and I'll add to that, Kelly Sherbo has been involved in the draft, so she has technically already approved it.
Okay,
Yeah, so
Okay.
it hasn't been signed because we are waiting for this conceptual approval
Okay.
of the boards. But yeah, it has been reviewed by legal.
yeah, so I think that Emily has just sent out in the text the particular motion that legal had proposed as the language. Do you see that, James?
In the chat.
In the chat.
Okay, in the chat says move to approve and authorize the executive director to negotiate and sign a contract for the Penn 1 Drainage Master Plan with the contractor for up to $135,000 using a form reviewed and approved by legal counsel.
Yes, that was our language.
So before someone makes that motion, is that motion acceptable, or does anyone need to discuss I guess needing review of that contract, or who that contract is between? You know, are there any issues going forward before we go ahead and make a motion?
Jeff, does that pass your smell test?
Yeah, I mean, you put yourself in my shoes as both
Yes.
a board member. Yeah, so
Absolutely.
I think parliamentary wise, James, I think you need to, I don't know who made the motion. You should probably just withdraw the original motion and have somebody move the new one.
So I will withdraw my original motion that I think I was the one who made, and I think it was seconded. And would someone like to make a new motion?
I'll move to approve and authorize the executive director to negotiate and sign a contract for Penn 1 Drainage Master Plan with the contractor for up to $135,000 using a form review and approved by legal counsel.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Thanks, Annalisa. We'll do a roll call vote. Claudio Campuzano.
Aye.
PJ Christopher.
Approve.
Annalisa Kohler.
Yes.
Jeff Noodleman.
Yes.
And James Allison, I vote yes. Passes unanimously. Thank you to staff.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I believe we're through our agenda other than new business. We have about 10 minutes left. Any new business?
Just real quick, my focus in the first 2 weeks is getting to know the staff, really focused on operations, making sure I'm understanding what we need to do to keep the current system in good shape and operational. Trying to learn our administrative processes and where the restroom is and how to sign into my email and all that sort of stuff, getting great help with that. And then beginning outreach to board members. I've reached out to some of you, not all of you, and have some appointments set. And then the last is, well, two more. One is focusing on some of the homelessness issues that are preventing us from accessing some critical infrastructure. So working with former colleagues at the city and elsewhere to try and wrangle a collaborative approach to some of that. And then last, working with Evan and Mark Landauer, our lobbyists with the Special Districts Association, and monitoring legislative action around some revenue that we're seeking. So that's really what's been going on in my first 2 weeks, and I'm really grateful to be here. So that's my little quick introduction.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Just take a breath now and then from drinking from the fire hose. I'm sure it's going to be a lot coming at you. If there's no more new business, I just want to go through the thing we do all the time, which is thanks. I really appreciate the level of board engagement you folks showing up today, asking good questions. And as always, thank you to staff for being so well organized, for giving us materials in advance, knowing that when those materials are quite detailed, walking us through the salient points. So great job, everybody. And we will see you next time.
Thank you.